Well, we've made it to the final track on Prince's Sign of the Times album, and it's for a song that's massively popular among Prince fans, beloved and considered by many as the best ballad in Prince's career. Of course, I'm talking about Adore. And joining me on this episode is first-time guest Scott Woods. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's my honor as well. I'm a fan of your writing. And maybe for those who don't know who you are and what you do, and maybe some Prince connections, like what your entry point was or when you started listening to Prince, if you don't mind giving the listeners a little bit of a brief bio on yourself, Scott.
Not at all. So I'm in Columbus, Ohio, been here all my life, and I became aware of Prince on his second album, right? So I was very, very young, but my oldest brother had a copy of Prince in his collection, and I was always rifling through his collection, and I saw this cover of this pretty chocolate guy, and I was just like, what is this? What's going on here? And I think I was like 7 or something when that came out, and I put the record on. I was always sneaking the records out, so I put the record on, and I realized I had already heard maybe like one of the songs, right? Like, you know, the release that had come out, and so I was like, oh, that's this guy. And so pretty much from that point on, I listened to Prince for the rest of my life. And I was a fan of one type or another through all those decades, right? And then about a handful of years ago, I looked up and I had basically grown into a writer, among other things. And I was maintaining a blog at the time. And I had written a bunch of essays about Prince. Anytime it occurred to me to write about Prince, I would just do it and throw it on the blog. And occasionally somebody might ask me to write something for a platform or a journal or something like that. So I developed a small reputation as a Prince writer, right? And so eventually I felt like I had enough for a book. So I went to my publisher. I had already published 2 books of poetry at that point. And I said, hey, I think I want to do this Prince collection real quick. And so we did it as a digital book first, just to kind of try that out to see how it felt. And then about a year or so later, we released a print version with expanded content, because I never actually stopped writing about Prince, as it turns out. And so that book's been out for, I guess now officially 3 years. Prince and Little Weird Black Boy Gods is the name of that book. And that brings us pretty much here.
Yep, here we are. This is your first entry point into the show, but obviously you've been part of the Prince community for a long time, writing about him, and we've done Prince Twitter threads on various songs, both of us over in the past. Adore is the song, of course, that we're covering today. And on this episode, and Adore is kind of like one of those beloved songs, as I already mentioned. It's hugely popular. Even though it was never technically a single, it probably got as much airplay as any song off Sign of the Times, especially
Definitely.
on R&B radio stations. It didn't, from a pop standpoint, maybe it didn't have that same crossover appeal as like You Got the Look. There was no music video for it, so that we weren't going to find it on MTV. But the fact that it was put on Prince's Hits collection in '93 speaks volumes about its popularity. I mean, only a handful of non-singles were added to that collection. Like When You Were Mine from Dirty Mind was added, a non-single, but one of those kind of like everybody knows it kind of songs.
Yeah.
And Adore is another one. It clearly is. And in terms of like it being the final song, it's really like an epic closing song. Any one of those songs on like the what I call side 4, if you have the vinyl version of Sign of the Times, would have worked as the final song on the album proper. Like The Cross would have worked. It's Going to Be a Beautiful Night, which was the song that usually closed the tour. but then Adore it just kind of slams it shut and says, this is over. Like this whole project is done. We're going to end it on this heavenly note. I don't want to get to the end of the song already, but the way the song ends is just immaculate, and that's a kind of a pun, intended pun there to talk about how it ends and use the word immaculate. But Prince's Adore is one of those kind of special songs. Scott, what are your thoughts on the song in general before we get to the lyrics specifically?
So, when you started to introduce the song, you had mentioned that this was, I don't remember the exact wording you used, but it was like, this is like, a lot of people think this is his best ballad or slow jam. Mm-hmm. And I think that if it isn't, it's in the top two, right? I vacillate between this and The Beautiful Ones, but I think that's more personal than technical. I think technically Adore is probably number one on any given day. And this song is doing a lot, right? It's carrying a lot. It's doing a lot musically. It's this hardcore soul song in the vein of the Stylistics, which we know that he was a fan of. With these heavy gospel notes, with these organs and this vocal stacking for this distinct choir effect, which he would do right regularly. That's not an unheard of thing for Prince to do, stack those vocals, but he would characterize them, right? Each voice would kind of get a character or a color or an inflection, a personality, basically. And that really comes through on this song. You can hear those distinct voices and their distinct personalities. They kind of fly in and out of the lead and that kind of thing. And it's not just like changes in register, right? It's like changes in color and inflection and that kind of thing. And so there are like 7 or 8 Princes on this song alone, right? It's like, the screamer, the pleader, the preacher, the pimp, the earnest prince, the female prince, they all kind of rotate out the first chair. It's just this amazing thing vocally, right? Just yeah. It's amazing.
He does go places vocally on this song that he doesn't really do on any other ballads on this album, like Forever in My Life or Slow Love. He definitely pushes his register in places. He sings it in falsetto, which by 1986-87 he wasn't, exclusively doing anymore. So for him to do that on this song, and you mentioned The Beautiful Ones, those two, technically both of them are ballads, you're absolutely right. But they're both so different in terms of like what their intent is. Like this is, to put a crude label on it, baby making ballad. Beautiful Ones is not that, right? Nobody's having sex to The Beautiful Ones. Well, I shouldn't say no one's having sex with The Beautiful Ones. Very few people are having sex with The Beautiful Ones. Interesting kind of sex maybe, but not your traditional sex. And this is a song like you could use this song during like a dance, like any kind of dance really, like a prom, or you could do it at a wedding reception.
Exactly.
There's lots of different places where this song would fit perfectly and match the mood of a couple in love, or there being some sort of commitment ceremony, something along those lines. Adore fits in that narrative and what the intent of those types of celebrations are there for.
Agreed. It's a trip too, like, just speaking lyrically without getting into the lines specifically yet, Prince has a lot of instances of being a poet lyrically. Like he's a very poetic composer, but this song relies less on poetry than it does performance, right? It's more of a vocal clinic, but maybe not lyrically outstanding compared to other things. Mm-hmm. And like if you just read the lyrics on paper, it reads like a lot of other love songs, right? But it's carried by passion, which befits the title, right? Adore is a powerful word. It's it's often conflated with love, but there's a component of devotion to adoration that is very specific. There's a reason why Earth, Wind, and Fire's devotion sounds the way that it does, right? It means what it says. And so does Prince's Adored. You know, I don't want to get too deep into the lyrics before we get to them, but it doesn't go full blown Eucharist, but the music and the passion with which it's produced is meant to convey this, a similar religious weight where the lyrics do not, so.
Yeah, and funny you mentioned Earth, Wind, and Fire, because didn't Earth, Wind, and Fire cover Adore during like the Prince tribute concert last year?
Oh yeah, yeah,
I think they did. I think they did, and that just kind of speaks a little bit to the more classical, traditional R&B influences that Prince was kind of leaning on a little bit in the performance of this song.
Yeah.
I mean, like somebody like Saint Vincent or Beck isn't going to perform Adore live. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
It needs to come from that same kind of place in order to really do the song justice. Unless you were going to do like a complete 180 and just flip the script, so to speak, and just completely change how the song sounds, which is fine and cool too. But I think people in a tribute concert, they're looking to hear a more faithful version, especially of a song like Adore that's so kind of beloved by many. They don't necessarily want to hear an art rock version of Adore, potentially.
Well, and there was this romanticism about Prince revisiting this style of soul music, right? It almost feels campy or overly nostalgic for about 5 seconds, but then its earnestness kicks in. And after you hear it once, like those initial feelings never return because now you know what's coming. And so, we know that Prince wanted to create a quiet storm kind of song, which for Black radio is a very particular subgenre of music, right? Mm-hmm. And so he nails the roots of that genre without coming off as dated. That's a really hard needle to thread, but he does it flawlessly.
Yeah. Like my understanding of Quiet Storm radio and R&B is that it appealed more to like grown-ups than it did kids.
Exactly.
Not to say kids couldn't get down with it, but I mean, it's kind of like adult contemporary, but for R&B in some ways. And maybe that's not accurate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott.
No, that's pretty accurate to how I grew up with it. Yeah.
It was really like this is grown up. This is grown folks music. This is a grown folks song, and I can see. And for me personally, like Adore wasn't a song that I gravitated for early on when I listened to Sign of the Times as a much younger person, as a teenager. Even though I liked R&B and I liked hip hop, this song felt a little more stuffy, or maybe just too grown up. It didn't have like the same New Jack Swing flavor of the latest New Edition song, or like the hard beats of like a Jody Watley or whatever. So it didn't feel like something like it did feel a little anachronistic. It did feel like maybe Prince was putting on his old school R&B hat for 6-7 minutes.
Yeah.
But you're right, earnestness is everything. I mean, he didn't do it tongue in cheek. He wasn't making this, he didn't create this song with a nod and a wink, I don't think. So it comes through, and that's why I think it maintained its popularity over the decades.
How old were you when this came out in 87?
I would have been 12.
Okay. Yeah. I was 16, and so I was very much into the ladies, and so I had like 1,000 uses for this song when it came out.
Yeah, I mean, but Scott, I grew up in a like 99% white town, and so a song like Adore probably wasn't gonna appeal to the ladies in the same way that like a Whitesnake ballad would have. So,
right.
This Is Love by Whitesnake might have had a little more impact for me. I'm a little more reluctant. But yeah, anyway, so I'm glad you brought up the Quiet Storm, because I kind of wrote that down in my notes. This feels like that kind of music, even though I'm not as intimately familiar with the subgenre, but I definitely am aware and know like some of the artists. Like he cited in the lighter notes of the hits and B-sides collection, Patti LaBelle and Luther Vandross, who are two artists that, kind of epitomize, I think, a lot of people's opinions or thoughts when they think of Quiet Storm, especially their ballads.
Yeah, definitely, and certainly as the genre kind of came into the 80s, like Luther owned that, right? But when it kind of was formulated in the mid 70s or so as a proper radio format, The artists were a little older, right? So,
Yeah.
that was like the Stylistics and Marvin Gaye and that kind of thing. And then, it changed obviously as time passed.
Yes, it did. So I'd mentioned a little bit about his maturity, and that seems to be kind of a word that I've been using, and some of my guests have been using a lot when we go through some of the songs on Sign of the Times. And I mentioned that I feel like this is a very mature song from a maturing artist. It isn't obsessed with sex, even though there are many examples and suggestions of sex in the lyrics, but the chorus is very sex free. It's very and that's how the song opens up. Besides his ooh falsetto that he opens up and stretches for a very long time to kick the song off, but the first lyrics you hear Prince sing is the chorus, and that chorus is until the end of time, I'll be there for you. You own my heart and mind. I truly adore you. If God one day struck me blind, your beauty I still see. Love is too weak to define just what you mean to me. So that chorus is sex free, as I mentioned. It doesn't mention anything about how great sex is or how hot she. I mean, your beauty. You say he mentions beauty, but it's beauty is a more classy way of saying somebody's attractive than wow, you're hot, or your body's slamming, something along those lines. So he's focusing on the beauty, and for me, just like the chorus just speaks to that comment I already made about the maturity and the growth of as a man that Prince was kind of experiencing around this time. As he's approaching his late 20s. It doesn't feel like the same Prince that wrote a song called "When We're Dancing Close and Slow," where he's whispering in the girl's ear, could you feel my heart on rubbing on you? There's nothing like that here in this chorus. It just feels a little more mature to me. I mean, do you agree with that, or am I?
No, I think that's fair, and it certainly kind of taps into, again, that root music that he's kind of pulling this style of song out of. So if you're shooting for something that's maybe tips its hat to soul music from us, like the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s, then yeah, the lyrics need to be a little less Prince-like, right? And so, and this course certainly does that. I think, the most outstanding thing to me about this course is the fact that the song begins with it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, how many times does Prince kick a song off with the chorus? Like, it's not typical.
It's pretty rare. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a long chorus too.
Statement. Yeah.
It's a long chorus, and yeah, it's like a thesis statement. Like if you don't get anything else out of the song, the chorus is the key thing to take away. Like the rest of the lyrics, like the rest of the verses, they just there to support the chorus.
Exactly.
The chorus is what people think of. It's what they remember. It's what you sing along to. It's the lines in the song that make it sound very romantic. It's talking about devotion and the importance of devotion and how devoted he is to the person that he's singing the song to, or whoever the song is about. It's very devotional sounding. Until the end of time. That's a very long time. It's forever. Truly I adore you. If God struck me blind, your beauty I'll still see. Again, that's just kind of like, it's more like a till death do us part statement is really what I think I get from the chorus. Is somebody could be saying these could be their wedding vows, really.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting to kind of frame it that way too, because everything that comes after this course ultimately in some way subscribes to the idea, right? No matter how out of pocket I may seem, a verse from now, understand that this is actually what I'm trying to say,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and love is not a strong enough word, essentially what he's saying. He says love is too weak to define just when you mean to me. So just to say I love you isn't sufficient. I've got to write this song. So then moving on to the first verse, and I'm going to read it all, but there's a decent amount of lines here. It's not a short It's not a short chorus, it's not a short verse, it's not a short song. So we're in it for the long haul here. All right, so the first verse, from the first moment I saw you, I knew you were the one. That night I had to call you. I was rapping till the sun came up, telling you just how fine you look. In a word, you were sex. All of my cool attitude you took, my body was next. You made love to me like you was afraid. Was you afraid of me? Was I the first? Was I your every fantasy? All right. Okay, so with this first verse, Scott, like, we don't have to dissect like literally every single line here, but like, what are some things that kind of jump out at you that you kind of want to talk about or think that are interesting?
So we have to talk about rapping.
Yep.
Right. So, because everything prior to that is basically this whole verse kind of sets up the history of their relationship, whoever this is that he's singing to.
Mm-hmm.
And, rapping always kind of jumped out at me. That's just basically shooting game, right? I just shot game at you all night. That's just how our first night went or whatever. And what's funny is he basically spends like the last 4 minutes of the song doing this very thing, right? Like, we'll get to it, but it's basically the rest of it's just like him rapping, right? We'll break it down, but he eschews traditional verse and chorus structure as the lead, and he lets the lyrics flow. And so it's all very conversational, which is what rapping to someone is all about, right?
Yeah, telling you just how fine you look. So that's I'm sure that was one of the common themes when he was rapping to her all night, is how fine she was.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like the overarching theme of that discussion that he had with her all night is, I mean, of course you have to assume if you're talking all night, like literally talking all night, you're getting to know the other person, you're getting a sense for what they're all about. And of course there's the attraction portion of it is pretty much established, but then what else? Like, for the first moment I saw you, I knew you were the one. So instantly attracted to her, wanted to know more about her, spent the night doing so. And then what I get from that, then, like, that's the first half of that verse. The second half of the verse talks more about, in a word, you were sex. All of my cool attitude you took, my body was next. So I kind of get like he's so into her, and he's so absorbed by her beauty that he kind of loses his cool a little bit. Even though he's been successful in spitting his game for throughout the evening, I think he maybe feels like he's potentially maybe overdoing it, maybe laying it on a little too thick. All of my cool attitude you took. I mean, that line could be interpreted a number of different ways. I don't know if you thought of an interesting way of interpreting that line, Scott.
Well, just that, he has been disarmed, right? So he has basically allowed himself, or either by virtue of him wanting to be, or by virtue of her ability to disarm him on her own, he is now vulnerable, right? So I thought, the line, in a word, you were sex, is kind of cool, right? This is because he's not just saying, oh, you look good, right? He is saying you are the primordial sex, right? You are like the embodiment. You are like everything that I can imagine sex should be or want it to be. And I would imagine that if you encounter such a being, that your cool attitude would be the first thing to go, right? So,
yeah. I would imagine so. I mean, as cool as Prince was, I'm sure even he could be disarmed by a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
And then going back or to the second half of the verse, the whole "you made love to me," again, that's kind of like, she take, which kind of makes it confusing when he says "you made love to me," but then he asks her, or says that you acted like you were afraid, which, a lot of times you think of like a woman taking the aggressive stance is because maybe they have experience or they know they're going for what they want. But I guess it can be both. I think that maybe is just a misguided notion that I'm coming up with. Like only experienced women can be aggressive when it comes to sex. Not necessarily, but I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting way of phrasing that to say like you made love to me, but then also follow that up with you were afraid. Were you afraid of me? Was I the first? Well, that's kind of an interesting statement there.
Yeah, there's some what's the word? There is some, I don't know if it's confusion, but there's definitely some double speak here, right? Like if to me the scene is you made love to me, like you was afraid, was you afraid of me, was I the first? There's certainly the suggestion that he makes here that, was I your first lover, I think is kind of not the situation, right? Like, I think we're pretty clear on that.
Yeah.
And I think that the music does an interesting thing here on that line, was I the first, right? So, like, when he says, was I the first, the horns do this weird kind of funny swirl right there, almost like this shock of trumpet and sax, right? At the notion that he might be her first. It's almost kind of a playful joke kind of thing. Which, if you just take the lyrics by themselves, you don't get, but if you hear it in the song, it all kind of gels. And so it's like, okay, we've kind of done away with that notion. Let us get back to the part where we are on equal footing as lovers,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point because, right, you just read it, you kind of get the impression that he's thinking she was the first because of how, I don't know, how tentative she was, or maybe how nervous she was. But it's that could be just him projecting a little bit, maybe hoping a little bit, like for whatever reason he hoped that he took her virginity because whatever, it's a conquering thing, or it's a man thing. I don't know, but I do like your point about how the music changes, because then it kind of like takes it away. Like, yeah, maybe you weren't, but whatever. It's all good. It's all good at the end. It was still good. It was still good time. So I don't really care if I was or wasn't. So then we go back to the chorus, and that's why until the end of. I mean, he adds the "that's why" because he's trying to connect the verse and the chorus together. That's why, until the end of time, I'll be there for you. You own my heart and mind. I truly adore you. If God one day struck me blind, your beauty I still see. Love is too weak to define just when you mean to me. And then he moves directly into the next verse. And the second verse is when... Yeah,
can I step in here real quick?
Absolutely. You can.
So there were two things that I observed about this chorus, the second appearance of this chorus. The first of which is he does something interesting here sonically. The chorus is sung differently, right? This time when he gets to the end of the chorus, when he says, just what you mean to me, that ends in this solo voice, right? It's no longer backed up by or layered or stacked. It's just this one Prince voice saying that line. And it's the rough Prince voice, right? It's an unrefined Prince voice. Mm. It's this one that teeters on not quite being in tune. And it's a real vulnerable expression, right? A real laying bare of the self. It's not pretty. And it's kind of guttural and real, which I thought was a fascinating choice. Like, out of all the ones that were singing at the same time, this is the one he wants to highlight. Like, he strips almost everything away, and you're just left with this one Prince almost speaking this line, almost not even singing this line. That's the first observation. What's also interesting here is that this is the last time that the chorus is sung by the lead, right? So it's repeated, but by background singers, and the lead does something else. But prior to this moment, we hear the chorus sung with the lead, sung with the background, all of that together. And so there are 4 minutes and 20 seconds of song left, and the lead does not come back to the chorus, right? It's like the very end, and then it's buried. But that's a lot of song to for the lead to not be focused on the chorus. Yeah, I thought that was profound, right?
The structure of the song is definitely different. It's not structured like your typical verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, outro. Yeah, there's the structure is all like, you're right. I mean, I didn't pick up on that, but you're absolutely right. He doesn't really sing the chorus again in the same way, kind of unadorned and, um, again, no pun intended, but without all the background. That was actually just a
Yeah, yeah.
really dumb accident. But yeah, it's definitely not done the same way. And to your point, there's a lot of song left, and that's why it kind of like feels like the song has like this really extended ad libs. I know they're not necessarily ad libs, but this second verse is super long. Like the first verse was, normal length ish. Second verse goes on for quite a while, and then he has that whole, and then he leads into another chorus, which is a little different. The chorus that he sings after the second verse is different than the first two times he sings it. And then a very long section where he's got all those lines that, where he sings the chorus in the background. So yeah, the structure is, I wouldn't say odd, but it is not typical. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, that's more than fair. It's funny because as a poet, poetically speaking, Adore is almost a classic ode in its design, right? It has its chorus and verses land in these similar sections, right? This strophe, this antistrophe, epode, and it kind of hinges on adoration and glorification. And so an ode isn't just a love poem. It's got this very specific job, and Adore works very much structurally the same way a classic ode does. I did not peep that until, obviously many years later, and found that fascinating on revisit.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And, as a writer, that's the kind of stuff that you might pick up on that, those of us who don't write for a living might not. So that's good insight. Classic ode.
And I don't, yeah, and I don't think he did that intentionally, for the record, right?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Always happy accidents in art. All right, so let's move on then to verse 2 if you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to read it the whole thing. It's long as hell. So here we go. When we be making love, I only hear the sounds. Heavenly angels crying up above, tears of joy pouring down on us. They know we need each other. They know you are my fix. I know, you know, that I ain't cheating, baby. They know this is serious. I ain't fucking just for kicks. No. This condition I got is crucial. And he repeats that, crucial. You could say that I'm a terminal case. You could burn up my clothes, smash up my ride. Well, maybe not the ride. But I gotta have your face all up in the place. I'd like to think that I'm a man of exquisite taste. 100% Italian silk, imported Egyptian lace. Nothing, baby, I said nothing, baby, can compare to your lovely face. Do you know what I'm saying to you this evening? I'm just trying to say. Then he kind of rolls into the chorus again, that until the end of time, I'll be there for you. And then there's a little bit of a break before he continues on. Okay, that's a lot. There's a lot going on here in this verse.
Yeah.
Oof. All right, so there's parts of this verse that are very like memorable because of how he performs it. And we'll get to that in a second, but kind of just like breaking it down into chunks, I guess. Early on in the verse, he talks about, he's again talking about sex. Like he said, you were sex early on. Now he says, now be making love. And for him to use and reference like the symbolism of heavenly angels crying, tears pouring down. I don't know. I just think it's a very, I don't know, like poetic way to describe the act of making love, having sex, and for him to do that in a song as opposed to doing it in a crude way, which again, to your point, doesn't match the tone of the song, doesn't match, how these types of songs have been created and performed in the past. It just feels like this is the right language to use, I guess, in this kind of a song. Heavenly angels crying up above, tears of joy pouring down on us. A little overwrought, but it's certainly poetic, and it matches the tone, I think.
Definitely. He really wants you to realize that, the love that they're making is so much more than just sex, right? It is this act that is so profoundly beautiful that, angels would cry and And instead of, that's not sweat, my love, that is tears of joy. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And then when doves cry, that was sweat. Now it's tears of joy. Okay, got it. This is next level, right? Got
It's
it.
definitely next level. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, and the angels, they know that we need each other. They know that you're my fix. That's who he's referring to when he says they know. I assume he's talking about the heavenly angels knowing this. And so they're like looking down on Prince, and they're giving their blessing. They think that finally Prince has found the one. We did our job. High-fiving each other. And I know you. This part's a little awkward to say. I know that I ain't cheating, baby. They know this is serious. I ain't fucking just for kicks. So, so now it's like completely juxtaposed with the really ornate language he was using earlier. And I ain't fucking just for kicks. So now he brings like the slang back and the modern language. I thought that was kind of a interesting thing too.
Oh, that's more than interesting, right? So it still amazes me that this line went out over the radio waves and no one caught it, right? It wasn't cut. It wasn't run backwards. It wasn't hidden. And it's because he sang it in this way that no one knew exactly what he was saying at the time, right? Yeah. It is as if he self-edited without actually removing the questionable content. And I can tell you, like having heard it on the radio 100 times back then, no one knew what he was saying in that moment. And so fucking just went out on the air every time that it played, right? It was just like, and then if you look at the lyrics of the original album, obviously that's not there, right? So I had to pull out my original copy just to be sure. And that there's several lines here that are not present there. It's just kind of it's not an ad lib. I don't think it's an ad lib, but I think he knew what he was doing, right? You don't make a Quiet Storm song. You don't intend to make a Quiet Storm song and then put that word in unless you can do something to that word to make it fit, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So he really, he got over on everybody on that. He got over on Warner Brothers on that one, right? So
yeah, there was no explicit content sticker on this album.
Right.
Yeah. That you're right. And I'm not going to pretend like I always knew he said the F word there, because obviously I didn't either. It was in the age of the internet and transcribed lyrics and blah 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 that I finally came across. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, the performance of the way he performs that and sings that line. What does he do? He kind of like sings it a little bit in his throat, like almost
exactly. He buries it in his throat. Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, he definitely got one over on everybody with that. But it is interesting to, as I mentioned, just because this is not a song based off of the lyrical content that we've gotten thus far, what the theme is, where you would expect him to curse. It just isn't. And then for him to do it, okay, cool, but then I'm just going to bury it, and I'm going to pretend like nobody's going to know that I said it. And why he chose to put it in there in the first place, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like, if it makes the pattern of the lines go well. I don't know what he would have put in instead of that word. I'm sure something could have worked. If he really wanted to get around not putting a curse word in the song, he could have done it. He just chose not to.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time on this song, so everything in here, for one reason or another, is intentional. So,
yeah.
Did you mention the crucial line? You did.
Nope, just going to get to it.
Okay, gotcha.
I haven't gotten there yet, but take it away, because I'll let you kind of talk about crucial.
Well, I don't have much to say, just an observation and a theory. So the line, this condition I got is crucial. Crucial, at least to me, is an interesting word here. In that 2 months prior to recording Adore, he records the song Crucial. And so by itself, this line doesn't mean much, save that it, to me anyway, it exposes how Prince sometimes, not consistently, but sometimes, carries a particular vocabulary for a while, maybe over a couple of records, right? or maybe just for one, or maybe a couple. But then he drops those things for other new words or concepts. And so it's not that he never uses the word again. I didn't actually comb through, the other 40 albums to determine if that were true.
Oh, man. I was hoping you would have done the homework for me.
Yeah. But, certain words appear in blocks, and crucial seems to be one of those words in this instance.
Yeah, and he does mention it. He does use the word in You Got the Look as well, which was recorded after this, since it was the last song recorded for the album.
Yeah.
So at that point, I don't know. I think I mentioned it in the You Got the Look episode. I don't know if he already knew by the time he recorded You Got the Look if Crucial was going to get cut from the final configuration, or if he was still kind of waffling on whether or not Crucial was going to make the Sign of the Times cut after Crystal Ball got nixed. I'm not sure, but I can see him adding to your point. Absolutely, there are words that he uses that are part of his lexicon for a period of time, an album or two, and then you really just don't hear him again. And if he does, it's usually like a callback, or it's something like he's trying to call back to an older song, which he didn't do a lot of. Let's just be honest, he didn't do a lot of that. So yeah, that's interesting there. You could say I'm a terminal case, and then this whole next section, you could burn up my clothes, smash up my ride. Well, maybe not the ride. And so that line is, he speaks that line. He doesn't sing it in, his falsetto. And that's a line that gets everybody laughing or excited, or, they hoot and holler when he plays this song live, because it's a funny line. I mean, it's his sense of humor comes out in this song, even though the song comes across as like being dead serious. He does have these moments in the song where it's not quite so serious, like that line. And then I think even the line 100% Italian silk, imported Egyptian lace. It's like, okay, we get it. You like the finer things, and to put those in there, it's just like, here's examples of what I consider, fine things in life. I think there's some humor. There's got to be some humor in those lines as well.
Oh no, that to me is, for about, 5 seconds, this is a comedy record, right? So, it's the only time where he really sounds the way he talks, when he says, well, maybe not the ride. Like that sounds like the way he actually speaks. And it's pretty much the only time in a song that happens, right? Which really just kind of drives the point home. Like, he just completely steps out of this song. As a matter of fact, if you listen to what the background line is, so he goes, you could burn up my clothes, smash up my ride, and then the background vocals go, you can smash up, as if they're about to say, you can smash up my ride, right? And then he cuts them off like, well, hold up now, wait a minute. Yeah, maybe not the ride, So he just completely steps out of the song in that moment, and it's just the funniest thing ever, right? Like, there are not nearly enough instances of Prince on record being funny as he is or was, but this is definitely up there. Right? This is
because exactly. He steps out of the song, because everything up to this point is like, there's literally nothing that I wouldn't do for you. I'm going to stick with you to the end of time. If I become blind, I'm going to still be able to see your beauty. I want to be with you forever. I'll give you everything. Well, maybe not the ride. So, and for a car, like a material item to be that important, that he's stepping out of the song for a humorous effect.
Yes. Also, you mentioned like the exquisite taste, Italian silk, Egyptian lace. Yeah. It's interesting how he defines his level of accomplishment, of class and distinction. Here he uses these things to run off his resume, to like expose his pedigree. I know beautiful things. I know what exquisite and valuable things are, and I hold you above them. It's the same sentiment that kind of gets perverted later in other R&B songs by other people, like R. Kelly, You Remind Me of My Jeep or whatever. But it's done to obviously worse and more crass effect later. But it's the same tool of this concrete valuation of the physical as a measure of a subject's worth.
Yeah.
Which is, it's nice.
Yeah. He knows what nice is, so you should take his word as meaning a lot. Like when he says that you're better than that, that means a lot. Is what he's trying to say. Like, I know what nice things are. Yeah, exactly. All right. So then, anything else with the second verse? I know we didn't talk about every single line, but not every single line needs to be dissected, I don't think. But
no, I think the only other thing I'd point out is where he says, just a couple lines later, where he says, "Nothing could compare to your lovely face. Do you know what I'm saying to you this evening?" Now that is like just a little bit of a cast off, right? Like, just this to you this evening is kind of the thing. It's not in the lyrics, proper anyway. And it sounds very kind of ad libby, but this is a black preacher mannerism, right? Like there's this, we've got this very gospel sounding song and this choir. And then here he comes as a black preacher on top of the organ playing out, which is this really dope thing to do. It's a very black church thing to do.
Yeah, good point.
Oh, and I will point out, I gotta throw this in here.
Yeah.
So usually when I'm looking up Prince lyrics on the internet, that, stuff like that, little things like that sometimes get lost, right? Whoever's, dictating the lyric or recording the lyric, they think that that's not important, or it's an ad-lib, or they don't hear it, or they don't hear it right. And I've found several songs over the years where it's just like, you have clipped this word, or you've interpreted this thing a different way, and it has changed the tenor of this line, of what he's doing here. And so I'm always going to make a case to throw that thing back in there because he did, and he did it intentionally. And those are touchstones, right? Those are cultural touchstones. And so it's important to get those right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in a song like Adore, where I think he was really kind of aiming for black radio. Whether or not the song wasn't released, it didn't matter, because he knew that it was going to get picked up by those stations. They were gonna play. At least I think he did.
Oh no, he definitely. I think this song sticks out so much that it was inevitable.
Yeah.
To the point of intentionality, right?
Mm-hmm. And in the next chorus, I call it the chorus because it's kind of got like some of the same words and lines, but there's enough differences that I'm just going to reread it. That until the end of time, I'll be there for you. He repeats that, I'll be there for you. Because at that point, like I said before, there was a little bit of a pause. I'll be there for you. You own my heart. You own my mind. I truly adore you. I truly adore you, darling. Adore you. And again, you have to listen to the song because I'm not going to be able to do it justice just reading it cold. You don't know what you mean to me, baby. And he repeats, baby, baby. Until the end of time, I'll be there for you. You own my heart and mind. I truly adore you. He repeats, adore you. So, again, it's many of the same lyrics, same lines, just sung maybe in a slightly different way, different inflections, different ways of singing it. Like, I don't know. You have to kind of listen to it. It's hard for me to describe, I guess, but it's different. Like, you listen to it, and like, that's not the exact same way it was sung before, because he's adding certain things. There's commas where there wasn't commas before. There's additional word. You own my heart and mind. I mean, he doesn't say that exactly the same way in the previous chorus. So I don't know. I just thought it was worth repeating.
Yeah. None of that section is captured in, the print of the original lyrics, right? It's a breakdown. It's not a vamp, but it's close. And so there's a lot more feel here, and especially in the register in which he sings, it makes some of the lyrics hard to parse out, which I think is the point, right? Like, at this point, he makes the words an instrument, bending them and bearing them as it suits his expression.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then we get to the part where we kind of said before, or alluded to him, this is where he's rapping to his woman. Mm-hmm. So these aren't spoken lines. He's still singing these lines, and I think throughout most of the background, I didn't make a point of noticing when the chorus is brought in and when it ends, but I'm pretty sure
at the
throughout
second
most
line,
of it.
yeah,
It's the second
yeah,
line? Okay, thanks.
yeah.
Thanks
Every
for that.
time you wander, the chorus comes back in the background.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. All right, so there's the chorus in the background after that line. So the lines are, can I talk to you, tell you what you mean to me? Every time we wander, I'll be your eyes so you can see. I want to show you things that I never show no other. I want to be more than your mother, more than your brother. I want to be like no other. If you need me, I'll never leave. I know that you know, without you there is no me. There is no me. Without you there is no sea. There is no shore. Love is too weak to define how much I adore. You child, the last words you hear. Be with me, darling, till the end of all time. I'll give you my heart, I'll give you my mind, I'll give you my body, I'll give you my time. For all time I am with you. You are with me. Whew. Yeah, so this is the section of lyrics where like there's a lot still of song left, and he starts singing these, and it goes on a while, but each one of these lines I feel like is kind of an impactful way of him to just keep the point of the song of how much that person means to him, and he's trying to give examples. I want to be more than your mother and your brother, which is a little bit of a callback to I want to be your lover when he said I want to be your mother and your sister too. So
it's a near quote, right?
Yeah, it's almost identical. He just switches out brother instead of sister. I mean, like the sea and the shore. Without you, there's no sea, there's no shore. Those are kind of new, unique sentiments that he's bringing up. A little bit like how he was bringing up, the heavenly angels, and just putting like really his devotion and his love in a poetic way, quote unquote, rapping again. This is the things that he's thinking that she wants to hear. She wants to know how devoted, how romantic can this man be, and he's trying to really up the ante there and basically kick every other man's ass when it comes to romanticism. So he's doing a good job, I think.
Yeah. What's cool is like Prince doesn't want to be all of those people to his lover or even want to be in their position in his lover's life. He wants to be the most important person, right? Now, that might have been unclear in 1979, where he just says, I want to be your brother, I want to be your mother and your sister. But by 1986, he clears it up by adding the desire to be more than those relationships to his lover.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I mean, I don't think that when you say more than your mother, that's quite elevated stance in that person's life. To mean more than to them. I mean, not everybody's relationship with their parents is amazing, but that's the person that raised you in theory. So that's pretty high praise, or that's a lofty goal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it is the person without whom you would not be here, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And those last lines of this breakdown, I'll give you my heart, I'll give you my mind, I'll give you my body, I'll give you my time. For all time, I'm with you. I feel like, and I missed the opportunity in prepping for this episode to come up with examples where he says similar lines like, I'm going to give you basically everything. And I know he says like, I give you my body, or I gave you my body in other songs, and I'm blanking a little bit, and I'm hopeful somebody who listens to the episode can cite some examples where Prince does this. But I feel like I've heard like this kind of thing before in a Prince ballad, but it's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't think of exactly which song I'm referring to. And who knows, it might have come after this. It might be once you start listening to 40 years worth of songs, sometimes the chronology gets mixed up, and it could be a song that I heard or that was made after this one, and he kind of was almost calling back to Adore, but I just don't recall.
There was this interesting thing that he does vocally, which I know I'm nitpicking here, but he does the lines, I'll give you my heart, I'll give you my mind, I'll give you my body, I'll give you my time. And so at the end of I'll give you my heart, he goes, I'll give you my mind, I'll give you my body, yeah, and then I'll give you my time. These little near chuckle cast-offs right, give this sense that these things may not be as serious as what he's building up to, right? So it's like my heart, oh, that's nothing. Like my mind, whatever. But my time, now that's serious, you know. I just think that's a
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool, almost unnecessary thing, right? But just that
yeah,
little extra bit of color just kind of takes it to the next level.
yeah. Time, time is one of those commodities that there's definitely a limited amount of, and this man had a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. So to ask him for time is asking a lot of a man like Prince.
And well, and then the next line after that is "For all time I am with you." And so, not only is he giving you his time, but he's giving you all of his time forever, right? So it's kind of, and it's kind of slickly profound.
Yeah, there's nothing in this song that really kind of paints it to be any kind of a song where you have to question the motives or question the intent. Is there an alternate intent going on here? I think it's
Mhm.
pretty straightforward. Like this is a really straightforward, romantic, devotional love song. And that's why I think it works for so many people because it's not angst ridden. There aren't these lines that make you wonder if there's some sort of weird power dynamics going on, or there's no, like, you don't feel like there's any possessiveness in the song either. Like sometimes Prince songs can get, like, he gets possessive in times in his lyrics. I don't really get that with this song. It feels like it's I'm giving you everything. Like
Yeah,
he's not taking stuff from her. He's giving things to her, giving him basically him everything that he has except for the ride. So so that's why I think this song really works for a lot of people, is because it doesn't have some of those more common tropes of Prince ballads where one can wonder, like "Do Me Baby," you feel like that's really just about sex. "Beautiful Ones" is about how, the angst from a breakup and how he feels about that and how much he's hurting inside. And this is really, like, even "Slow Love" is a pretty similar song like that, but that's more about the physical aspects of a relationship and
hmm
of a connection that two people can have. This is something a little deeper, I think, and that's where people really pick up on that and appreciate his ability to articulate that in this song in a way that he
yeah.
maybe didn't do a lot of up until this point. He
hmm
does he does romantic later. He has more songs along this vein, but by 1986-87, there weren't a ton of examples. All right, so Scott, is there anything else you wanted to talk about with this song? Anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't already approached?
Not really. This is not a new love first, morning after kind of song, right? This is a song that reflects on a longer relationship, and at some point he has had to reassure his lover, and so that's kind of what this song is doing. It's a reassurance.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. This isn't, even though the first verse he's talking about like how he met and a little bit of the setup, like, this is how we met and this is what it was like. By the time we get to the end of the song, this isn't like a second date statement. He's not proclaiming this and singing this song to somebody who's in, the very early stages of a relationship. So I agree with you there for sure. This is one of those, like, I'm ready to commit. I've experienced all this with you. This is my commitment song, and it's a beautiful one. And then the song ends with the kind of like that chorus of angels, of Prince angels, singing right behind him when he says, "All time I am with you." And what's the last line? It's
You are with
"You are
me.
with me." It is very epic and it is very angelic sounding, choir sounding, I guess you could say. It sounds like a choir. It really does, and it does a
Yeah,
great job.
ascending into eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, because there is no choir here. It's just, I believe it's just Prince, right?
Well, there is, and then I think at the very, very, very end, I think that's like a Fairlight or something like that. So he
Okay.
just kind of blends his vocals into a vocal sounding thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
but he didn't hire some sort of choir
No,
to
yeah.
do that. So he was able to do that with his own voice and some studio trickery. So good job. All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Would you mind telling people where they could find your work or check up on what you're doing?
Sure. So I'm on all the social medias. I'm pretty easy to find at this point. But if you want to go straight to my blog, it would be Scott Woods Writes. That's WRITES .net, and that will get you to my writing on a variety of things.
Cool. I'll definitely put a link to your site on the show notes so people can easily access it. I'll also put a link to your book because people should check that out as well. I would highly encourage anybody who's into Prince and just wants a different kind of take on, Prince, and just from like the essays, so if you're not into one essay, check out the next one because there's plenty of them and they're all good. I like the book personally.
Thank you.
It was definitely a breath of fresh air for me. You kind of want a more personal perspective, which is what you offer.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Scott. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at Press Rewind Pod on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also on YouTube now. This episode won't be on YouTube for a little bit, but check out some older episodes as I upload them. You can also follow my blog, pressrewind.net. I just post a few musings on Prince's music every once in a while. Maybe my personal thoughts on an album or some memories I have of an older album. As I'm starting to get older, I feel like I need to get some of these memories down before I lose them forever. So that's kind of what the blog is there for. And also just to support the podcast as well. So thanks to all the listeners. And until next time, goodbye.